What if everything you think you know about ancient Egypt is only the surface of a much deeper, hidden truth? When most people hear the words ancient Egypt, a familiar image instantly comes to mind. Towering pyramids rising from endless desert sands. Golden masks covering the faces of long-dead kings. Mummies wrapped in linen, preserved for eternity. It's a world that feels almost fully understood, studied, documented, and explained. But what if that image is incomplete? What if the Egypt we think we know is only the visible tip of something far more complex? Something buried not just but beneath history itself. Because when we begin to look closer, really closer, cracks start to appear in the story we've been told. Historians place the beginning of ancient Egypt around 3100 BC, with the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under a single ruler. From that point onward, a powerful civilization emerges along the Nile River, developing writing systems, religious beliefs, and monumental architecture that would stand the test of time. On the surface, it all makes sense. A gradual rise, a logical progression, a civilization growing step by step. But then, we encounter the pyramids, and everything changes. The Great Pyramid of Giza is not just large, it is precise. Built from over 2 million stone blocks, many weighing several tons, aligned with near perfect accuracy to the cardinal directions. Its base is almost perfectly level. Its orientation toward true north is so exact that even modern instruments struggle to match it. This isn't just impressive. It's unexpected. Because according to conventional history, this structure was built using simple tools, copper chisels, stone hammers, ropes, and manpower. No steel, no advanced machinery, no modern technology. And yet, the result looks anything but primitive. The cuts are clean, the alignment is exact, the scale is massive, and here's the part that makes it even more mysterious. We don't actually know how it was built. Yes, there are theories, ramps, pulleys, workforce organization, but none of them fully explain the precision, the logistics, or the sheer efficiency required. No complete construction method has ever been proven. No definitive set of tools has been found that can replicate the results exactly. It's as if we're looking at the final product without understanding the process behind it. And that's where the iceberg begins. Because the pyramids are just the first layer. As researchers began to study ancient Egypt more deeply, they started noticing patterns, subtle details that suggested something more than simple construction. The layout of structures, the alignment with celestial bodies, the use of specific measurements and ratios, all of it pointed toward a level of knowledge that feels advanced, almost intentional beyond necessity. For example, many Egyptian temples and monuments are aligned with astronomical events, solstices, equinoxes, and specific star positions. The Great Pyramid itself is aligned with incredible accuracy to the cardinal directions, and its internal shaft appeared to point towards certain stars that held significance in Egyptian belief. This isn't random. It's calculated. It suggests that the builders had a deep understanding of the sky, of geometry, of mathematics, and not just in a basic sense, but in a way that allowed them to integrate that knowledge into massive architectural projects. And that raises a question that becomes impossible to ignore. Where did this knowledge come from? Because civilizations typically evolve over time. Skills improve gradually. Techniques develop step by step. But in Egypt, we see something different. We see a sudden leap, a level of sophistication that appears early, almost fully developed. There are no clear practice versions of the pyramids leading up to the Great Pyramid. No long chain of trial and error. Instead, we see structures that seem to arrive already refined, already perfected. And then, the progression slows. Later pyramids are often less precise, less refined, almost as if the knowledge that created the earlier structures was fading. This is not the pattern we expect. It's the opposite, and that's what makes it so fascinating, because it suggests that ancient Egypt may not have been a starting point, but a continuation, a civilization building upon something that came before. Something we may not have fully discovered yet. As we move deeper into the iceberg, we begin to encounter more of these anomalies. Stone carvings with incredible detail. Structures built with massive blocks that seem almost impossible to move. Evidence of techniques that don't quite match the tools we believe they had. Individually, each of these can be explained, at least partially. But together, they form a pattern. a pattern that points toward a gap in our understanding. And within that gap lies a mystery. Because history, as we know it, is based on what we've found, what we've interpreted, and what we've been able to prove. But what if there are pieces missing? What if there are chapters that have been lost, buried, or simply never discovered? Ancient Egypt may be one of those missing chapters, not because it doesn't exist, but because we don't fully understand it. Because beneath the temples, beneath the tombs, beneath the sand itself, there may be layers of history that tell a very different story. A story where knowledge was greater than we assume, where technology may have taken forms we no longer recognize, where the line between science and spirituality was not as separate as it is today. And if that's true, then everything changes, because it means that the pyramids are not just monuments. They are clues left behind by a civilization that knew more than we give it credit for, clues that point toward a deeper truth, one that challenges the idea that human progress has always been a straight line from primitive to advanced. Maybe it hasn't. Maybe there have been rises and falls, moments of great knowledge, followed by loss. And ancient Egypt might be one of those moments, frozen in time, partially understood, waiting to be rediscovered. Because the more we study it, the more we realize that we're not just uncovering history. We're uncovering questions that don't have easy answers, questions that force us to rethink what we believe about the past, and questions that lead us deeper into the iceberg. Because what we see on the surface, the pyramids, the artifacts, the familiar symbols, that's only the beginning. Below that lies something far more mysterious, something hidden, something waiting. And as we continue this journey, we're going to dive deeper into layers where the explanations become weaker and the mysteries become stronger. So stay with Mystery of the Ancients. Because if this is just the surface, what if the ancient Egyptians weren't just skilled builders, but masters of knowledge we still don't understand today? As we descend further beneath the surface of the Ancient Egypt Iceberg, the story becomes less about what was built and more about how it was built. Because the deeper researchers look into Egyptian structures, the more one thing becomes clear. This wasn't ordinary craftsmanship. It was precision on a level that feels out of place. Scattered across Egypt are artifacts that challenge the idea of a primitive civilization. Granite statues with mirror-like polish. Massive stone boxes carved with perfectly flat surfaces. Drill holes etched into some of the hardest stone on earth, featuring spiral grooves that resemble the work of modern machinery. And here's where things take a turn. When modern engineers attempt to recreate these marks using the same tools believed to be available in ancient times, copper chisels, stone hammers, sand abrasives, the results don't match. Not even close. The cuts are rough. The grooves are inconsistent. The process is slow and inefficient. But the ancient results? They are smooth, precise, uniform, almost as if they were created using tools we don't officially recognize. One of the most debated examples comes from cylindrical drill cores discovered in Egypt. These cores show deep, consistent spiral patterns, indicating a drilling speed and pressure that surpasses what simple hand tools should be capable of producing. Let that sink in. Ancient drill marks that outperform modern experimental recreations. So how is that possible? Were the tools misunderstood? Were stronger materials used? Or was there an entirely different method at play? One that has been lost to time? Because this isn't just about tools. It's about knowledge, a level of understanding that allowed ancient builders to work with stone in ways that still puzzle experts today. And it doesn't stop there. Take the massive granite blocks found in structures across Egypt. Some weigh over 50, 70, even 100 tons. These stones were not only cut with incredible precision, but also transported over long distances and placed with remarkable accuracy. Even today, moving something of that size requires advanced machinery, cranes, hydraulic systems, carefully engineered logistics. So how did an ancient civilization accomplish this thousands of years ago? The traditional explanation points to manpower, thousands of workers pulling stones using ropes and sleds. But when you consider the scale, the precision, and the timeline required, the explanation begins to feel incomplete. Because it's not just about moving the stones. It's about placing them perfectly, fitting them together so tightly that, in some cases, you can't even slide a piece of paper between them. This level of precision isn't accidental. It's deliberate, and it suggests something deeper, something systematic. Because to achieve results like this, you don't just need strength. You need measurement. You need consistency. You need a deep understanding of geometry. And when we examine ancient Egyptian structures, that understanding is everywhere. The pyramids, temples, and monuments are filled with geometric patterns, ratios, alignments, and proportions that seem carefully calculated. Some researchers have even pointed out relationships between these structures and mathematical constants, suggesting a level of sophistication that goes beyond simple construction. And then there's the sky. Ancient Egyptian architecture doesn't just align with it aligns with the stars. Many structures are oriented towards specific celestial points, certain stars, constellations, and solar events. The Great Pyramid itself is aligned almost perfectly with true north, with an accuracy that rivals modern surveying techniques. This wasn't guesswork. This was intentional design. Which brings us to a question that becomes harder to ignore with each new discovery. Were the ancient Egyptians discovering this knowledge themselves? Or were they inheriting it from something that came before? Because civilizations typically evolve. Knowledge builds over time. Mistakes are made, lessons are learned, and gradually, progress is achieved. But in Egypt, we see something different. We see a level of precision and understanding that appears early, almost suddenly, and then, over time, it fades. Later constructions often show less accuracy, less refinement, almost as if the original methods or knowledge were being lost. This reversal is unusual, because progress is supposed to move forward, not backward, unless something interrupted it, unless the knowledge wasn't fully understood by those who inherited it, or unless it came from a source that no longer existed. These possibilities open the door to deeper theories, ideas that challenge conventional history. Some suggest that ancient Egypt was influenced by a previous civilization, one that possessed advanced knowledge and passed fragments of it down. Others believe the answers may lie in natural phenomena, lost techniques involving sound, vibration, or even unknown properties of materials. And then there are more controversial ideas, that the level of precision we see could only be explained by technologies far beyond what we currently attribute to that time. Ideas that remain debated, questioned, and often dismissed. But here's the thing. The evidence itself doesn't disappear. The precision is still there. The anomalies are still there. The unanswered questions are still there, and they continue to challenge us. Because no matter how we try to explain them, we keep running into the same problem. The results don't match the explanation. And that's what makes this layer of the iceberg so fascinating. Because it's not based on myths or legends. It's based on physical evidence. Stone, measurements, marks that can be seen, studied, and analyzed, and yet still not fully explained, which means one of two things must be true. Either our understanding of ancient Egypt is incomplete, or the past was far more advanced than we are willing to accept. As we move deeper into this iceberg, we begin to leave behind the familiar explanations and enter a space where certainty fades and possibilities expand. Because the next layer doesn't just question how things were built. It questions what might still be hidden. Secrets buried beneath the sand. Chambers that remain sealed. Structures that have yet to be fully explored. And the deeper we go, the more it begins to feel like ancient Egypt isn't just a story of the past. It's a mystery that's still unfolding. What if the greatest secrets of ancient Egypt are still hidden, sealed away, and never meant to be discovered? As we move further down the Ancient Egypt Iceberg, we leave behind visible monuments and enter a world that exists beneath them, a world of hidden chambers, sealed passages, and structures that remain unexplored to this day. Because what we see on the surface, the pyramids, the temples, the statues, may only be a fraction of what actually exists. And the deeper scientists look, the more they realize something unsettling. There are spaces inside these ancient structures that no one can fully explain. Using advanced scanning technologies, researchers have discovered large voids hidden within the Great Pyramid. Massive empty spaces, located deep inside the structure, spaces that were never documented in ancient records. Perfectly shaped, carefully positioned, and completely sealed. No doors, no clear entrances, no explanation, just emptiness, or at least what appears to be emptiness, because no one has physically entered these chambers yet. Which raises a powerful question. What's inside? Are they unfinished sections, structural features, Or something intentionally hidden, something meant to remain untouched? And why would such massive spaces be built only to be sealed off completely? The mystery deepens when we consider that the Great Pyramid isn't the only structure with hidden elements. Across Egypt, there are reports of underground tunnels, buried chambers, and networks that stretch beneath ancient sites. Some have been partially explored, revealing corridors that lead nowhere or rooms with no clear purpose. Others remain completely inaccessible, almost as if they were deliberately closed. Ancient texts also hint to the existence of secret chambers, places reserved only for the highest levels of society, areas where sacred knowledge was stored, protected, and possibly hidden from the rest of the world. These weren't ordinary rooms. They were described as spaces of power, of knowledge, of transformation. And in some cases, they were said to be sealed for a reason. But here's where things become even more intriguing. In modern times, access to certain areas of Egypt has been restricted. Some locations are closed off to the public. Others require special permissions that are rarely granted. Officially, this is done to preserve the sites, to protect them from damage. And that makes sense. But it also creates a question that's hard to ignore. If everything has already been discovered, why are there still places we can't see? Why do scans continue to reveal new anomalies? Why do hidden spaces keep appearing in structures we thought we understood? Because every time technology improves, we uncover something new, something unexpected, something that suggests the story isn't finished. It's still unfolding. And then there are the underground legends, stories passed down through generations about vast networks beneath the sands, hidden holes filled with artifacts, lost libraries containing knowledge from a time before recorded history. Most of these stories are dismissed as myths. But occasionally, something happens that makes people pause. Unexpected tunnels discovered during excavations. Strange cavities detected beneath temples. Structural anomalies that don't match known architectural designs. Small pieces of a much larger puzzle. And we're only seeing fragments, because exploring beneath ancient structures is incredibly difficult. The risk of collapse, the complexity of the layout, and the preservation concerns all limit how much can actually be investigated. Which means there could be entire sections of ancient Egypt that we haven't even touched. Think about that. For thousands of years, these structures have stood in silence, guarding whatever lies within them. And we've only explored a portion. What if the most important discoveries haven't been made yet? What if the answers we're looking for are still hidden underground? Because when we consider the level of precision, the advanced knowledge, and the unexplained techniques we've already seen, it becomes clear that ancient Egypt wasn't just building monuments. They were creating something layered, something complex, something designed with intention, and hidden chambers fit perfectly into that pattern. Because if knowledge was considered sacred, if it was meant to be protected, then it makes sense that it would be hidden, sealed away, accessible only to those who knew where to look, or how to access it. And that leads to one final, unsettling thought. What if some of these chambers were never meant to be opened again? What if they weren't just hidden, but locked away, on purpose? Because as we continue to scan, explore, and analyze these ancient structures, we keep finding evidence that suggests there's more beneath the surface. More than we expected, more than we can currently explain. And the deeper we go, the clearer it becomes. Ancient Egypt is not fully uncovered. Not even close. It's a mystery with layers, each one revealing new questions, new possibilities, and new uncertainties. And we're only halfway down the iceberg, because the next layer doesn't just explore hidden spaces. It explores something even more controversial, something that blurs the line between history and belief, between science and the unknown. Because what if these structures weren't just physical, but functional? What if they were connected to something we still don't understand? What if the gods of ancient Egypt were not just symbols, but part of a knowledge system we no longer understand? As we descend deeper into the Ancient Egypt Iceberg, the line between history and mystery begins to blur. Because now, we're no longer just talking about structures or hidden chambers. We're talking about something far more difficult to define. Power, energy, and the possibility that ancient Egypt wasn't just a civilization of builders, but a civilization of understanding. Ancient Egyptian texts are filled with descriptions of gods, beings connected to the sun, the stars, and forces beyond human comprehension. Ra, who travels across the sky; Osiris, who governs life and death; Thoth, the keeper of wisdom and sacred knowledge. To many, these figures are symbolic, representations of natural forces or spiritual beliefs. But when we look at them through another lens, a different possibility begins to emerge. What if these gods weren't just stories? What if they were interpretations of something real? Because ancient texts don't just describe gods in abstract terms. They describe movement, light, sound, power. There are references to radiant objects, divine energy, and forces capable of influencing the physical world. At first glance, this sounds like mythology. But when we combine these descriptions with the physical evidence we've already explored, the precision engineering, the unexplained construction techniques, the hidden chambers, a new pattern begins to form. A pattern that suggests ancient Egypt may have been working with concepts we still struggle to understand. Take the Great Pyramid, for example. Officially, it's considered a tomb, but when we analyze its structure, certain features raise questions. Its internal chambers are positioned in ways that don't follow typical burial designs. There are shafts that extend outward at precise angles, seemingly aimed toward specific stars. The materials used, particularly the limestone casing and granite core, have unique properties. Some researchers have suggested that these materials could interact with energy, vibration, or frequency. Now, this doesn't prove anything on its own, but it introduces a possibility. What if the pyramid wasn't just a monument? What if it had a function? Some theories propose that the Great Pyramid could have acted as a type of resonance structure, a system designed to amplify or focus energy. Not electrical energy as we understand it today, but something more fundamental, vibrational, acoustic, even harmonic. This idea may sound extreme, but consider this. Modern science already uses frequency and vibration in powerful ways. From medical imaging to communication systems, we rely on waves and resonance more than we realize. So what if the ancient Egyptians understood these principles in their own way? What if their approach wasn't based on wires and circuits, but on geometry, materials, and alignment? Because when you look at the precision of their structures, it feels like more than architecture. It feels like design with purpose. And if that purpose involved energy, whether symbolic, spiritual, or physical, then the role of their gods begins to change. They are no longer just figures of worship. They become part of a system, a way of explaining forces that couldn't be easily described, a way of passing down knowledge through story. And this wouldn't be unique to Egypt. Many ancient civilizations describe similar concepts, being connected to the sky, knowledge coming from above, and structures aligned with celestial events. Different cultures, different locations, but similar patterns, which raises a question that becomes difficult to ignore. Were these civilizations discovering the same truths independently, or were they all connected to something larger? Because when multiple sources point in the same direction, it suggests that there's something there, something worth exploring. And then there's the idea of lost knowledge. If ancient Egypt truly understood concepts related to energy, vibration, or advanced geometry, what happened to that knowledge? Why isn't it clearly documented? Why don't we see a continuous progression of it through history? Instead, it feels fragmented, incomplete, as if pieces were lost or hidden. And this brings us back to the hidden chambers, the sealed spaces, and the unexplored areas we discussed earlier. Because if there was knowledge that needed to be protected, where would it be stored? And who would have access to it? Ancient Egyptian society was highly structured. Knowledge wasn't freely available to everyone. Priests, scholars, and elites held access to sacred teachings, often kept secret from the general population, which means that if there were deeper understandings, whether scientific, spiritual, or both, they may have been intentionally restricted, not meant for everyone, not meant to be widely known, and over time, possibly forgotten. Because civilizations rise, and they fall, knowledge can be preserved, or it can disappear. And if something disrupted that chain, war, disaster, or societal collapse, then what was once understood could become myth, stories, symbols, misinterpreted over generations. And that may be what we're looking at today. A civilization that once understood something deeper, now remembered only through fragments, through structures that still stand, but no longer fully speak, through texts that hint, but don't explain, through patterns that suggest, but don't confirm. And this is where the ancient Egypt iceberg becomes truly fascinating. Because we're no longer just asking how things were built. We're asking why. Why such precision? Why such alignment? Why such mystery? Because if everything had a purpose, then we haven't fully discovered it yet. And that means there's still one final layer left. The deepest part of the iceberg, the place where speculation meets possibility, where the most controversial ideas begin to surface. Because what if ancient Egypt wasn't the beginning? What if it was a result of something even older? Something lost. Something almost completely erased from history. What if ancient Egypt wasn't the beginning, but the remains of something far older? At the deepest level of this iceberg lies the most unsettling idea of all, that Egypt inherited knowledge from a lost civilization. A civilization advanced, powerful, and completely erased. The precision, the alignment, the impossible construction. Maybe they are not creations, but remnants, echoes of a forgotten world. And if that's true, then history isn't missing pieces. It's been rewritten. The pyramids aren't just monuments. They are warnings, clues, proof that something came before us and disappeared. Subscribe to Mystery of the Ancients. Watch again and decide, because the truth isn't gone, it's buried.